interested in power because power determines what goes on in the world and what people do. For over 40 years, I've taught the social science of power at Stanford University's Graduate School of Business. I've taught future prime ministers and top executives at Meta, Google, X, and many more. And now it's my privilege to share my knowledge with you. But I want you to know something from the start. This class is going to make you uncomfortable. If you think hard work, loyalty, and waiting your turn will get you promoted, you're dead wrong. If you don't understand power, people less talented than you will take your promotion, influence your career, and determine your future. This class is especially useful to anyone who has faced extra hurdles to success, because the world is stacked against them and they need to know the tricks of the trade. I'm pulling back the curtain to show you how power really works. The stakes are your career. I'm Jeffrey Pfeffer, and this is Masterclass. Power is an important subject to be learned whether you're doing a startup or whether you're trying to climb the corporate ladder. Power is a key to professional and personal success, and therefore I find it my mission to help people become more successful and effective in their lives and in their careers. But power, like any tool, can be used for evil or it can be used for good. Almost every form of social change, ranging from the civil rights movement to changing how medicine is practiced, requires having enough influence to disrupt, to change the status quo. If you're going to change lives and organizations in the world, you're going to need power and influence, because if change were going to happen without exercising power and influence, it would have happened already. Getting power entails doing things that don't come naturally to you or most other people. If it came naturally, it would be easy to do and would provide you no advantage. Typically in the world, there are differences of opinion, and power is your ability to make things come out the way you want them to. Power is not changing your temperament. Power is not about changing your personality. Power is a set of behaviors and skills. And over the decades in which I've taught this material, I can tell you, you can learn those skills. These are about behaviors. They aren't changing who you are, they're changing what you do. I have seen through my own experience, my students become better and more effective versions of themselves. So these are not just feel-good theories. In fact, everything I'm going to teach you is based upon social science evidence acquired over decades. Now let's discuss how to approach a new job or evaluate your current position, because you can't rise to power if you're on the wrong path from the beginning. There is a term called product market fit. Does the product fit the market? I would say that there is another factor called person-job fit. Do you fit the job? And that is, number one, do you have the skills required for the job? That's pretty obvious. But number two, does your persona as it currently is fit the culture of the organization? Do you have an interpersonal style that will make you comfortable in that place? And many people who take positions where they don't fit wind up not lasting very long because of that. As you're thinking about taking a job, ask yourself, do I have access to people at the highest level of the organization? Do I have a job where, depending upon my performance, somebody would care? Or do I have a job that's considered to be relatively irrelevant to the success of the organization? Look at the people who have been there in the past, what happened to them, and ask yourself, are people, as they try to recruit me into this position, offering me development opportunities? Do they say this job is going to lead you to some other higher level job, or is it a dead-end job? Sometimes jobs are high paid because they're not going anywhere, and so I have to pay you a lot now because the future is not going to be so bright. Sometimes you have jobs with titles, and the titles have substituted for money, or the titles have substituted for opportunity. So Google the title of the position you're being offered, along with the company name, and see what happened to the people who held it before you. Never take a job where you are programmed to fail. When you get on a plane, they teach you how the oxygen masks work and where the emergency exits are. Similarly, I think when you enter an organization, you need an exit plan, and you need to spend some reasonable percentage of your time, 10 or 15%, making sure that if something goes bad, you have an exit, that you know how to get out in a good way. You can spend time to try to fix a situation, or you can spend that same amount of time and effort finding a better situation where there's a better person-job fit. In general, I think you are much better off trying to find situations where you have a higher chance of success rather than to remedy the situation that you're in if you don't have a high chance of success. Number one, you should work in a department which historically has produced a lot of senior management. Number two, go to the place within the organization that has the best opportunity to solve the organization's critical issues, resolve uncertainty, and bring in resources. Ask the question, is this a department that's going to become more or less important over time? In hockey, they say you want to be where the puck is going, not where it's been. And similarly, I think in your career, you want to be ahead of the game. You want to be trained in advance of needing those skills in your job. You want to be in the jobs that are becoming important, not in the jobs that once were important. And finally, is this a position that provides you visibility, that provides you connections, that provides you contacts, both inside the organization and outside? Is this a position that spans the boundary between the organization and perhaps other competitors or industry associations, so you can get visibility not only within your job and within your organization, but in the industry more broadly? And it's quite fair as part of your interview process to ask people those kinds of questions. They expect it. In every organization, there are roads to the top, and there are also positions that are dead ends. First, study your company's organization chart to understand the chain of command. And an organization chart shows you who is related to who in terms of the formal authority structure, who is higher in the organization and who is lower in the organization. But I would not rely solely on an organization chart. I would also rely on the actual flow of communications, because oftentimes there are people who are very important in the organization who may not be very high on the organization chart. Measure the social structure. When you start a new job, you should create a power map. A personal power map looks at not who is supposed to interact with whom, but who actually does interact with whom. You need to pay attention not only to the leaders, but to the people who have access to those leaders, to the people who are helping the leaders or keeping the leaders' calendars. When I tried to get the late Jack Valenti, head of the Motion Picture Association of America, to my class, I never called Jack. I called his executive assistant. So sometimes people in supporting roles control much more than you think about how people spend their time. Sometimes people far down in the organization structure actually allocate resources in important ways. Those are all things you could think about. Where you physically work is also important. So I have a former student who understood the importance of social relationships in career success. When he went to work for this venture capital firm, they said, you know, we're a little short on space. We can find you this private office off by itself, but we also have an empty desk right in front of your boss's office. And he took the empty desk, even though it was a desk that might have been occupied in the past by an assistant, because he knew that sitting in front of his boss's office, everybody who wanted to see the boss would see him. And he could talk to them informally and build relationships with them. And he also knew that with a desk in front of his boss's office, he would have way more contact with his boss. You should look at who has power so that you can spend more time with those with power and less time with those who aren't going anywhere. If senior management is in the office, you should be in the office, regardless of whether they let you do your job remotely, because you'll have an opportunity to talk to them and to build a relationship with them. If you're not in the office and they're in the office, somebody else will be in that office and they will build the relationship that you need. Now, what if working on site isn't an option? In that case, on Zoom, it's very important for you to speak about your accomplishments, because that is the best and most assured way for people to know what they are. Your boss is not necessarily thinking about you, particularly in situations of remote work, but even if you're there, it is not your boss's responsibility to figure out what you've done. It's your responsibility to make sure your boss knows what you're doing and what you are accomplishing.
Should I be worried about bragging about my accomplishments?
Well, you know, bragging has an interesting connotation to it, a negative connotation. You should never brag about your accomplishments. You should inform people about your accomplishments. A different framing. It's, of course, doing the same thing. But, you know, how can somebody know what you've done? How will people know your skills unless you tell them what they are?
I'm going to ask you a lot of questions as if it's me, but I'm just speaking for the millions.
Of course, you're speaking for the billions.
Exactly.
Not millions, we want billions to watch this. One of the ways in which you move up is by having good job performance, but the other way in which you move up is by having the power skills to have those who are in positions of authority promote you. We need to talk about managing up because, in the words of my good friend Keith Ferrazzi, you are not responsible for your career. It is other people who are in the position to promote you and to make your career successful. As your boss decides whether or not to promote you, your job performance is only one component of what he or she is going to take into account. They're going to take into account mostly how you make them feel, whether they like you, whether they think you are collaborative and cooperative with them, whether you are a good subordinate. And a good subordinate flatters the boss and does what the boss tells him or her to do. Maya Angelou had this lovely line that people may forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. If you flatter people, you will make them feel good about themselves, and therefore they will feel good about you. People, I think, are reluctant to flatter because they think it's sucking up or they think it's kissing up or something. But studies show that flattery can be pure deceit. It's better if it's sincere, but it doesn't need to be, because people are motivated to believe the wonderful things you tell them. Social scientists have tried to figure out if there was a point of diminishing returns for flattery. They expected, like many other things, that flattery would maybe even turn downward so that, approval and influence goes up to some point, but beyond some point of flattery, that it would turn down or at least flatten out. They never found that. In other words, it would be almost impossible to have too much flattery. And no wonder. Studies have shown that more than 50% of people in any context will say that they are above average on every positive trait. They're above average in their sense of humor, they're above average in intelligence, they're above average in their good looks, they're above average in income, which is why flattery can be such a powerful tool. Flattery is a gift. Use it very generously, particularly with people in power. Let's talk about criticism. People love to think good of themselves, so they are motivated to self-enhance, and criticism challenges that. Therefore, it is imperative, or at least very useful, to avoid directly criticizing, or for that matter, challenging people who are higher in the organization's hierarchy than you are. Bosses do not like to be criticized. And by the way, the higher the level of the boss, the less they like to be criticized. So the best way to point out something that's wrong without causing a defensive reaction on the part of the person who's done the thing that's wrong is you make it seem as if they did it for reasons other than their own personal judgment, that they were forced to do it, or it was sensible at the moment that they made the decision, or they couldn't have anticipated how the decision was going to turn out. So you say, even though at the time you did something that was incredibly smart, circumstances changed and now we need to change course because it's not working as well. So if you're going to try to tell the boss to change course, you need to do it in a way that is not directly confrontational. And I have learned over the years how to do that. I was on the board of an egomaniacal CEO, and when I wanted him to do something that he might not even think that he wanted to do, I would say, his first name was Kevin, I would say, as Kevin brilliantly suggested in a prior meeting, we should do X. And by the way, that mostly works because Kevin is not going to say, by the way, I didn't say that brilliant thing that you thought I said. Mostly they will say, yes, I did say that. Isn't that a great idea? So people love their own ideas. Therefore, you want to make your idea seem like it's their idea. People always underestimate others' willingness to help. So social scientists at Columbia conducted an experiment. They recruited subjects who were told to approach strangers on campus and ask for things like, "Could I borrow your cell phone? Would you fill out a questionnaire? Or can you help me find the gym by walking me there?" But before they asked the strangers for help, they asked the participants in the study how many strangers they thought they would need to ask to get that level of help. So in order to get 3 people, how many do you think you're going to have to ask? And the estimates were quite far off. In general, the actual subjects had to ask about half as many people as they thought they would in order to get the level of help that they needed. And on top of that, the task was so uncomfortable that a relatively high percentage of people, in some instances 20%, refused to complete the experiment even though they had agreed to do it. So people find asking uncomfortable, and they think they're going to have to ask many more people than they do in order to get the help that they need. We're trained to be self-reliant, and so asking for help feels uncomfortable, even though it's a wonderful way of bonding. Because if you ask somebody for help and they give you that help, you've not only flattered them, but you've begun to build a relationship with them. When you ask someone else to give you assistance, you've actually elevated their status. If I say to you, I need your help, I have said, you know something I don't know. And what is more flattering than that? Asking is flattering. You could see the crew adjust every crease and wrinkle. That's because they knew, like I did, that in the first 10 seconds of this class, you would decide, based on my appearance, if I'm worth listening to. I feel gorgeous. So first impressions are extraordinarily important because you only get one chance to make a first impression. Nalini Ambady, a former social psychologist at Stanford, did studies of the importance of initial impressions, which you would call thin slices. In one study, she showed 9 people, randomly selected, 10-second silent video clips of instructors from actual classes. She asked the 9 people to rate those clips on a variety of attributes, including confidence and competence, etc. And then she compared these aggregated ratings to the actual course evaluations given by students who had been with them for the entire quarter and found a relatively high correlation. And that is because the students in the class and the people watching the videos were processing the same thing: how they looked, how they came across. And what she found is that people began to form first impressions of people in the first 10 seconds when they met them, and that those impressions color everything that comes after that. So if my first impression of you is that you're brilliant, everything you do after that I will code as being brilliant. I will look for the brilliant aspects of what you do and forget about or not notice the less brilliant aspects of what you do. And by the way, if you think about your own behavior, you will see that study in action, because you will see you, as you go through life, meet people, you will form relatively quickly impressions of them, and you will see how those first impressions often overwhelm subsequent evidence that you get. That is why your most important day on your job is your first day. You should spend a lot of effort thinking about how you're going to show up on that first day, what you're going to do with the first opportunity, because that will color all that comes after. Your personal appearance matters because people respond first to how you look, secondly to how you sound, and by far least important to the content of what you say. Economists have found that taller people are more likely to become leaders, more physically attractive people earn more money, so that's all evidence for that. Now, you don't have to undergo plastic surgery. You don't have to wear lifts in your shoes. There are obviously elements of your persona and your being and your personal appearance that are outside of your control, but there are many things that you can control. You can control your footwear. You can control the wardrobe and whether or not you wear hoodies or something that's a little more dressy. You can control the colors that you wear, and some colors will look better on some skin tones and types than others, and so you should pick a color that makes you look good. You can control the makeup, you can control your jewelry, you can control many things about how you show up and therefore how you look, and whether or not people think you look powerful. One of the ways to appear more powerful when you first meet someone is to, first of all, make sure you're standing up tall. When you meet someone, you should shake their hand before they reach to shake yours, and you should move towards them. It is powerful to maintain eye contact continuously, and maybe even to lean towards the other person that you're talking to. By the way, Lyndon Johnson was a master at this. There's a series of pictures of him, with him like leaning over shorter people and really kind of getting very close to them, which I think really illustrates exactly what I'm talking about. Jack Valenti, head of the Motion Picture Association of America, was maybe 5'4". After he came to my class, on the next class, one of the students said, even though he's physically short, he feels tall. And that is exactly what you want to do. You want to have presence. And presence is based upon how you show up and how you command the room. People will assume a lack of competence if you demonstrate a lack of confidence. If you talk as though you are not confident, using filler words, hemming and hawing, not using simple, short sentences, people will assume you don't know what you're talking about. So if you have a point to make the point. Don't say, I think I might have a point to make. Think maybe that I should, let me tell you what it is. But on the other hand, pauses are very important. Silence is very important. You need to oftentimes pause to get your emotions back under control. You need sometimes to pause to think about what you're going to say next. And because people don't, in fact, like quiet or silence, sometimes when you pause, you'll get other people to say things, including things that they shouldn't say. So speaking in a confident way, acting in a confident way, using confident body language, people will assume you know what you're doing. Let's look at two executives being grilled in front of Congress with the sound off. Which one do you think inspires more confidence? One is the head of BP following the devastating Gulf of Mexico oil spill, and the other is the CEO of Goldman Sachs, accused of shorting securities that they had sold to their clients. So in the case of Tony Hayward of BP, he came with a script which he read for the first 6 minutes. As he was reading, of course, he could not maintain eye contact. As he read, he was hunched over. 3 or 4 months after he appeared before Congress, having lost the confidence of his board, he resigned. Lloyd Blankfein of Goldman Sachs makes a lot of eye contact, never apologizes, acting in a confident fashion and inspiring confidence among his employees and his board. He retired out only after 8 more years as CEO of Goldman. Your job as a leader is to inspire confidence in the people who are around you, your customers, your employees, your board, your peers. If you inspire confidence through your confident behavior, you will stay as a leader. If, on the other hand, you show up and you look weak and apologetic, you will probably not stay as a leader very long. But one of the reasons someone may not feel confident is imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome, which is amazingly common even among extraordinarily successful people, is the belief that you have gotten your position because of luck or randomness or something, and that you don't actually deserve to be where you are. And imposter syndrome causes people to worry about, I'm going to be found out. Somebody's going to find out that I'm not really as good, not as qualified, not as smart as I think I am and as I need to be. So if you want to get rid of imposter syndrome, you want to psych yourself up perhaps by looking at the mirror and saying, I've got it, I know what I'm doing. You certainly want to do something like look at the other people who occupy similar positions as you and say, am I really worse than those people? Of course not. You should look and think and say, I've gotten my job because somebody other than me believes that I actually deserve the position that I'm holding. You should never let self-doubt dominate your behavior at work, because self-doubt gets in your head and inhibits your ability to engage in the kind of thought processes that will make you successful.
But if I feel insecure, how do I keep from feeling insecure? How do I keep feelings of self-doubt at bay?
The best way to keep feelings of insecurity and self-doubt at bay is to act as if you feel confident. And confidence is exuded through your body language and through your tone of voice and through your eye contact and through all those things. Attitudes do not lead behavior. Attitudes follow behavior. So if you act confident, if you act like I am a person who belongs where I am, you will over time come to adopt that attitude. People change and grow all the time. There's been a conventional wisdom for a long time that doctors And lawyers should not get that close to their patients or their clients because you want to be in a position to be able to deal with the person that you're seeing as objectively as possible. Same situation in the workplace. Being open can certainly build trust, but work relationships are not friends and family relationships. You do not necessarily want that level of closeness with your work colleagues. There was a 2018 study in which people in leadership roles shared job-irrelevant personal information. And in 3 experiments, it was found that sharing this personal information made them look weak. And I believe that's because the expectation is work is about work. When you share personal information, that signals either that you don't know what to do with respect to the work tasks and or you don't have as much confidence as you should have. So leaders need to act like leaders. You are not telling people stories about your life. You're talking about work-related issues.
So does that mean I can't have friends at work?
You can have friends at work. And people do, in fact, build and have friends at work, but you have to understand that your work friends are also, in many instances, your competitors because you're all competing for promotions. So you need to be a little more thoughtful and discreet about what you tell them and what you don't. When you overshare in the workplace, you're bleeding control. Wardrobe! I missed you. I'm sitting so still.
I know.
It's not helping. I don't think we've used enough tape.
Nope.
And we have definitely not used enough makeup. I hate this, you know.
Now you're in your zone.
I'm definitely in some zone, the Twilight Zone. Unless you come from a very wealthy family, being yourself is not going to earn you a living. So you're going to have to get a job doing something, a doctor, lawyer, engineer, baker, whatever. And once you say, I have to get a job to earn a living, then you need to find a way to differentiate yourself from the billion other doctors, lawyers, bakers. And branding is part of the way in which you differentiate yourself. Branding is part of the way in which you market yourself. And we all need to market ourselves. Your brand begins probably long before you did a job interview. Disseminating your brand requires you to worry about and think about the use of social media, TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn. You want to think about what your picture looks like. You want to think about what your biography looks like. So if you want to be known as an expert in healthcare, you need to make posts about healthcare, not posts about, your cat or your dog or some personal story. If you want to be known as an expert in whatever field you are, your communications should reinforce the sense that you actually have expertise in that area. Every individual is going to have a slightly different brand. And so therefore, every individual has the opportunity to build and develop a look which is consistent with their brand. And they're not all going to look alike. And the brand is not always going to be the same. And it shouldn't be the same. The brand is their unique fit in the world based upon their background, their training, their experience, what they've done. I think an element of your brand can be how you show up physically, how you dress, how you look. Mark Zuckerberg's brand was the famous gray hoodie. There's Jensen Huang with his leather jacket, or Anna Wintour with her sunglasses. Physical appearance can be part of the brand. It's particularly part of the brand to the extent that it ties in to some element of the brand. So if you are going to say an element of my product market is going to be design, you need to look well designed. Many people, I think, have tried to develop a particular look which is consistent, I think, with their brand. But you also want to develop a particular look as a way of standing out. People say don't judge a book by its cover, but of course everybody does. We are judged by the image that we create and the image that we project. Your image defines and determines how people are going to interact with you and how they're going to react to you. This also applies to working remotely. In a remote environment, your personal portrait and certainly your Zoom background helps to define who you are. You should always be thinking about personal branding. By the way, your brand is like your skills. It does not have to be permanent. You are going to develop skills throughout your career. Your brand can evolve. A strong brand is a key to success. Part of your brand is how you look, but a lot of your brand is the stories that you tell. So a person's brand is not their resume, it's not their biography. It is a 2 or 3 or 4 sentence statement that connects their past, their life story, their experiences to what they are doing or what they want to do. So to take an example, I had an African-American student in my power class at Stanford who did not talk much during the year. But on the brand building day, we called on him. It turns out that he was a doctor as well as being in the MBA program. He said, I came from the part of St. Louis where people did not have access to good medical care. Maternal mortality was high and lifespans were low. I went to medical school to learn the science of health. I went to business school so I could learn to build organizations that could deliver that science to the community from which I came. There's a brand statement. It ties his history to what he wants to do in a compelling way. Once he revealed his brand, which was not, by the way, well known in the class, people knew how to help him. So there were people who said, oh, yes, I can help you because I'm an expert in nonprofit management. Or I can help you because I'm very good at fundraising. Because people know what your brand is, it helps them figure out how can I be helpful to you or if I can be helpful to you. VCs consistently tell me that the people they are most interested in funding are people who have a personal experience, a personal history that makes them uniquely insightful and qualified about the organization that they're trying to found. So your brand statement needs to explain how you got to where you are and also where you want to go, what your aspirations are, and weave in efficiently the experiences that make you uniquely qualified to do what you want to do. I would describe it as an elevator pitch for you. Nobody's going to read your resume on an elevator, and your resume is probably too long to be described to them on an elevator. What's your elevator pitch? Who are you? What are you trying to do? What makes you qualified to do it? 3 or 4 or 5 sentences. Quick, fast. If you are successful in building a compelling brand statement, and if you are successful in transmitting that brand statement more widely than just your immediate family, then your brand will be how people describe you when you're not around. You can do many things to get known and make sure that your brand is well disseminated. You can post on social media. You can figure out what conferences are available to you in your chosen profession and try to get invited. You can certainly do blogging. You can certainly try to write in articles and magazines. It is extraordinarily useful to be seen as a thought leader. That gives you a little status mark and helps differentiate you from the hundreds or thousands or maybe even tens of thousands of people who are also working in your industry. I think it is absolutely important for you to not only tell your story, but to tell your story repeatedly. If Mercedes has a brand, they don't just say, this is our brand once for a certain kind of car with a certain kind of quality. They take out ads repeatedly. So Absolute repetition is important because anything repeated is more likely to be believed. You need to tell a story about yourself. And if you don't, somebody else will. Or worse than that, no one will. You won't be hired unless somebody knows who you are. You're not going to be promoted if you're forgotten. Networking makes many people feel dirty. Many people don't like it. But it's not much question that networking is positively related to rising up and to having more power and more influence. And by the way, most people do not spend sufficient time networking. One study suggests that you need to spend 6 to 8 hours a week networking, or about an hour a day. So I want to change how you spend your time. I want you to spend a tiny bit of less time doing your job and a tiny bit more time connecting with people. You can never know too many people, because the more people you know, the more people you will know when you need help, the more people you will know when you need information, the more people you will know to offer you job opportunities, the more people you will know when you need to raise money for your startup, for investment, for whatever. Life is pretty much a numbers game. And so to the extent that you have broad and deep and diverse social networks, you start off with a big advantage in any game that you're playing. Within your network, there are strong ties and there are weak ties. Strong ties are ties to people that you see frequently and to whom you're deeply emotionally connected, people like close friends and family. Weak ties are people that you know more casually. Mark Granovetter did a study entitled Getting a Job, a study of contacts and careers. What he found is that people found the best jobs through weak ties, people to whom they were not strongly tied, not their family and friends, but people who they knew casually, because the people who they knew casually could introduce them to non-redundant contacts and information and jobs. We should certainly target people who know things and are in domains that stretch us. You know, so if I said to you, we're going to go to a gym, the most comfortable thing to do in a gym is to lift the weights that you're already comfortable lifting. You don't push yourself. I think networking is a perfect example of that to the extent that you network only with people that make you comfortable, you will not expand your horizon. I don't need to know people who know the same people I know. I don't frankly need to know people who know the same things I know. I need to know people who provide me new information and new contacts. And those tend to be the weak ties. Also, you don't have to be an extrovert to network. You don't have to be an extrovert to act and speak with power. These are all skills that can be learned. We're not talking about personality. I don't want to change anybody's personality. I want to change what you do. Let me tell you about a student of mine named Omar Shaya, who started an artificial intelligence company. So Omar was at the airport. He saw a very, very prominent CEO, relevant to his product. He did not know the CEO, but he recognized him, went up to him, showed him the product on his phone, and thereby made a connection, and the CEO became an advisor to his company. It did not come naturally to Omar. It does not probably come naturally to anybody. A lot of this is about getting out of your comfort zone. It is only the things that are different and that are not easy to do that actually provide you any benefit. Ronald Burt has done many studies of networks and careers. And the general finding is that people who occupy positions in social structures that are bridging positions, brokerage positions, where they are connecting people with different ideas, groups with different ideas to each other, substantially outperform people who don't have those social networks. What does a real estate agent do? They connect buyers of houses with sellers of houses. What does a VC do? A venture capitalist connects someone with a business idea with other people who have capital to invest in business ideas. So networking is actually an act of generosity. Connecting people who could be usefully connected to each other requires you to understand something about them as individuals. The more background you know about someone, the better able you're going to be to build a personal relationship with them. There are thousands of ways to connect with people. If your senior executives play golf and you're not a golfer, number one, you could learn to play golf. Or number two, you could figure out other ways of connecting with them. People may go to the theater. People may like recommendations for movies. Everybody has something to offer to other human beings, but they will not know your knowledge, your insight, your wisdom, your perspective, how you see the world, unless you talk to them. I would say it this way: the most connected people have the richest lives because they know more people, more things, and have more opportunities. It's the only way to describe it. No!
Sorry.
No!
Yes.
No!
You're beautiful, but we're making you more beautiful.
Are you coming back? You were just here. I haven't seen you in 3 minutes. Why don't you just stay here?
I'm missing you.
I can make a movie about this. This could be a routine on Saturday Night Live. In every industry, in every situation, in every job, there are expectations about what you should and should not do. Breaking the rules means pushing the boundaries of what you are permitted and or expected to do. It means perhaps defying social expectations. It perhaps means defying social norms. And in some instances, doing things that you're not even permitted to do. It's important for people to understand that power can be used for good, but to do that effectively, sometimes you need to break the rules. Social change occurs only by people breaking with norms, rules, conventional wisdom, in some cases laws. Martin Luther King, while he did not use violence, did in fact encourage people to break with rules and with laws promoting segregation. Nelson Mandela became the father of South Africa while he was in prison for breaking the laws of apartheid. Almost all social change occurs by people taking to the streets and doing things to violate laws or regulations that they feel are unfair. The individuals who advance in organizations, or for that matter in society, are for the most part not those people who follow the rules because then they just don't stand out. The people who advance are the people who forge new paths, who break with social convention, who break the rules. Breaking the rules, number one, often catches people by surprise, so you will be notable and remembered. Breaking the rules causes you to stand out. Because powerful people get to break the rules, if you break the rules, you will be perceived as having power. In a famous social science experiment, Dutch academics enlisted a group of actors to role-play rule-breaking behaviors. And then they measured what observers thought about their power. They take up too much space, they eat the extra cookie, they leave crumbs around, they drop cigarette ashes on the floor, they cross their legs. They do small but important things that suggest that they are not constrained by social norms, and the people who broke the rules were seen as being more powerful, having higher status. And that's because of this heuristic association between the ability to break the rules and your status. If you go to a bunch of meetings with the same set of people, you will find that after a while, everybody sits in the same place. So sit in a different place. In particular, sit at the head of the table. In other words, take initiative to do things that give you the power to be prominent in the front of the room. As long as you can not get sanctioned, then of course, you will have undone a lot of the power advantages. So you only want to break the rules if you think you can get away with it. Most people, by the way, don't push things nearly far enough because most individuals are conflict averse. So when you do something that violates norms or expectations, you will get less pushback than you think because most people don't want to fight with you about that. It is always easier and better to ask forgiveness than permission. To take a very simple example, if you have a child and the child says, "Mommy or Daddy, can I eat the cookie?" You can say no. If the child comes to you and says, "Mommy or Daddy, I've eaten the cookie," your options are much more limited and unpleasant if you want the cookie out of the child. We know from the study of finance that there is a trade-off. The safer the investment vehicle, the lower its expected return. The trade-off between risk and return is true in careers as well. If you never do anything particularly bold, you will probably not get fired, but you will also not have an accelerated career. So if you want to have an exceptional career, you have to do exceptional things and therefore pose some risk. One of the most controversial things that I say is never apologize. The problem with apology, and you see this all the time, you see this in politics particularly now very visibly, when people apologize, "I'm sorry that we did something wrong," the apology doesn't end anything because people will say, "Okay, if you're sorry, why did you do it in the first place? How did it happen?" So you basically then have to apologize for all the chain of events that led up to the thing for which you're apologizing, and it makes you look weak. The strongest political figures don't apologize. I had a former student of mine tell me the other day, she arrived late for a meeting. Her first tendency was to apologize. Jeffrey says, never apologize. What am I going to do? Because I have, in fact, arrived late. She turned it around. She said to the people waiting for her, "Thank you for waiting. I'm so appreciative." If you make a mistake, you should find a way to accept accountability without apologizing. You should also find a way to fix the mistake without necessarily apologizing. I started this class by telling you I might make you uncomfortable. This is one of the subjects that I think makes people uncomfortable and challenges conventional wisdom. There was a study called "Do Nice Guys and Gals Really Finish Last?" where people looked at personality data collected early in life, and they looked at the correlation between agreeableness and career outcomes many decades later. And for both men and women, agreeableness was negatively related with salary. And in general, what they found is that niceness does not work very well. If you think about it, being nice may lead you to not negotiate hard for raises and promotions and resources that you need to get to do your job. Niceness may cause you to avoid conflict, and conflict is often healthy, and bringing disagreements to the surface is often a way to make better decisions. Niceness may cause people to refuse to ask for the tools and resources they need to do their job because they will be seen as pushy. All of these phenomena cause really nice people to not do as well as people who are less nice. One should never be gratuitously mean or nasty or cruel, but this idea of not optimizing on likability simply means that you need to get things done. And sometimes as you work to get things done, people will not necessarily agree with what you're doing or like how you're doing it. Your job is not to be liked by everybody. You cannot let other people define for you what you are able and not able to do, because then you have given them your power. Prioritize performance and achievement over whether or not people like who you are. It is often appropriate to show anger in the workplace. Anger used well signals high standards and power. Larissa Tedens, former colleague of mine who went on to become president of Scripps College, did an experiment which demonstrated that people who displayed anger were seen as being more powerful. And so, yes, it is appropriate to show anger, maybe even towards your boss, particularly if your boss is a bully. If your boss, and this is true for political figures as well, if a political figure is known as being bullying and abusive, the only thing they will understand is bullying and abuse. So you have to basically moderate or modulate your emotional response to the emotional response of the person that you're dealing with. You want to use any emotion with some variation. So if you're angry all the time, no one will take the anger seriously. It's like the boy who cried wolf. If you cry wolf all the time, nobody will pay attention. So you want to moderate, you want to have variation in the emotions that you display. You don't want to be angry all the time and screaming all the time. You don't want to be nice all the time. It turns out if you're nice all the time, a little anger gets people's attention.
It sounds like you're telling people that they can be angry in the workplace. It sounds like you're saying they shouldn't apologize when they do things that are wrong. Isn't this encouraging abusive behavior in the workplace?
Well, I do not think this actually is encouraging abusive behavior, because abusive behavior is actually harming another human being. So the anger can be directed towards, the fact that your supplier has not done what they were supposed to do and sent the goods or the product on time. So there are, I think, a variety of ways of doing this without being interpersonally abusive. Machiavelli in The Prince said the leader should be both feared and loved. But if you had to choose only one, be feared. And I think that is still good advice to this very day. So notice I didn't say be angry and abusive all the time, which of course makes you only feared. The best thing is to be both feared and loved. But if you have to choose one, be feared. Power is 20% granted and 80% taken. Years ago, I met Keith Ferrazzi, a marketing guru who's had a very, very interesting career. When he graduated from Harvard Business School, he had an offer from McKinsey and an offer from Deloitte Consulting. And he decided to tell Deloitte that he would go to work for Deloitte on one condition and one condition only. And that is that he could have dinner with the head of Deloitte Consulting at least once a year. That, of course, breaks a variety of rules. The rule, first of all, of following the chain of command, and certainly in a job interview, asking to talk to the CEO seems like a very bold move, which of course it was. It turns out that Deloitte accepted Keith's condition. The CEO not only was willing to have dinner with Keith Ferrazzi once a year, but Keith got to know the CEO's family, and the CEO became a sponsor and mentor for Keith. About 6 years later, Keith became the youngest person ever elected partner at Deloitte. Most people wait. They wait for permission. They wait for direction. They wait to be told what to do. Power favors those who move first, those who take the initiative, not those who follow protocol. I need art. I'll never be able to teach again because I will say, my collar is not perfectly straight and there was no art.
I know.
I quit. After Art has listened to all of this, Art may become a different kind of wardrobe.
You got that right.
He may ask for a raise. God knows what he's going to do.
Promotion, please.
But
No one is struggling to be at the bottom of the corporate hierarchy. No one says, please take me to the bottom. Everyone wants to be higher up. The higher you rise, the more people will want your position. Some will wait and some won't. And so therefore, the higher you rise, the more you have to worry about people trying to take you out. So you need to be prepared. You need to be vigilant. You need to not get overconfident. You need to keep your eyes on your rivals and your potential rivals. The competition to rise to the top gets much more intense the closer you get to the top of the organization. And in fact, the skills required to reach the top become more and more about power and less about technical skills because the people without technical skills have fallen by the wayside. And so you need to pay attention to the people who are around you, above you, and below you to ensure that you have cordial relations and positive relations, but also that you pay attention to what they're doing. The best way to handle potential rivals is what former San Francisco mayor and California Assembly Speaker Willie Brown practiced, which is called strategic outplacement. When Willie Brown won the speakership in 1980, his biggest rival in the state assembly was a man named Howard Berman. 4 months after winning, Willie created a new seat for Berman, away from the California State Assembly and in the U.S. Congress. So you should get your rivals a fabulous job in another organization or another part of the organization, thereby removing them and making them your best friends at the same time. But you won't always be able to do that. If there's a power struggle at work, you don't want to back your rivals into a corner. Number one, the more they're in the corner, the harder they will fight, and you don't want them to fight any harder than they're likely to anyway. And secondly, you, I think, want to leave them a way out, a way to leave the scene of battle. Particularly if your idea is going to win, you want that person to be able to step away from their position without losing face and without continuing to hate you because of what you did to them. And therefore, I think you want to be gracious in victory. As you rise up and you have more and more responsibilities, the dangers of becoming overcommitted and managing your time poorly increase. And so therefore, you want to be able to say no. And you particularly want to be able to say no to non-critical tasks and to non-critical asks. You need to be able to separate the important from just the things that people are asking you about all the time. You know, once you're the CEO, you can't actually do everything in the organization anymore. You have to delegate. And so one of the ways in which power goes to your head is you believe you know everything. And therefore, if I know everything, I want to do everything. And then you'll become overwhelmed. If you want to maintain power, I think the most important quality is curiosity. Curiosity about your business, curiosity about the world, curiosity about life, curiosity about the people who you're working with and for, so that you remain alert. I think the way people lose power is to go to sleep, metaphorically. People become complacent, which they would not have done on the way up. I would say smart leaders never stop doing what got them into their position in the first place. So if you got there by being intellectually curious and learning all the time, you will want to continue to be intellectually curious and learn. If you got there in part because you know a lot of people, you want to maintain those relationships and maybe continue to meet even more people, which is easier to do from a high status role, because the higher status your role, the more people want to associate with you. So when people become powerful, there is a saying that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. I don't think power necessarily corrupts, but power does lead, for most people, to a sense of disinhibition, in the sense that they believe that now I'm in power, I can do whatever I want. And I can stop doing the things that brought me into power in the first place.
When you look at Trump and all you know about power, what are you seeing before your eyes?
When I look at Trump, I see basically the playing out of everything that we're talking about in this class. He's built a strong brand, breaks the rules, and never apologizes. Power becomes self-fulfilling because power, once achieved, causes other people to come over to your side. Condoleezza Rice, former national security advisor, head of the Hoover Institution at Stanford, has a quote that goes something like, once people understand that you can damage them, that you can hurt them, they will come over to your side.
It sort of sounds horrendous. Should we condone this behavior? What are we to do with that information?
What you are to do with that information is use it in guiding your own behavior. In the case of football, you can figure out how to be better at doing whatever the people who are beating you are doing, at tackling, at protecting the quarterback. You can't say, I don't like getting hit. You want to get hit? Don't play football. And if you say to yourself, I don't like that, or I'm not good at that, or I'm not comfortable at it, you can get comfortable, you can get better. That's what coaching and training does. But if you really don't want to do it, find something else to do. There's a famous writer, Clementine Paddleford, has this saying which I love. Don't have a wishbone where your backbone needs to be. I do not expect every person watching this to go out and become a CEO. I have given you a guide. I've given you guidelines. I've given you information and insight. But how you use that information and insight is up to you and what your personal values and preferences are. For the people watching this class, I hope two things. Number one, you will take away insight that will make you a better observer of the world around you, that will help you understand why things are the way they are. Even if you don't use that knowledge to advance your own career, at least you'll understand what other people are doing. And secondly, I hope that you will use this to, in fact, advance the causes and things that matter most to you. Hopefully, I have provided some of the tools that will help you find your own power. Now go out there and use them. Rise as high as you want.